広瀬さんの体調の方はどうなんですか？
どうしてですか？
この家のせいじゃないかと。
やっぱりなんかあるんですか、この家。
What if one conversation was enough to make you doubt the life you thought was already enough? I want to tell you a story that feels small on the surface, but deeply familiar once you let it sink in. Hirose. She is a woman living a life many people would describe as enough. A modest home, a loving partner. Nothing dramatic. No obvious pain. Her days move with a gentle rhythm, meals shared, small conversations, the comfort of routine. Psychologically speaking, she is in a state of emotional stability. Not ecstatic, but secure. And for most of us, that kind of peace is already a form of success. Then one afternoon, the past knocks on her door. An old friend appears, not as a threat, not as a villain, but as a familiar presence carrying memories and opinions shaped by time. They talk, they reminisce, and somewhere in the middle of a seemingly harmless conversation, he shares his personal thoughts about the future. Not facts, not warnings, just interpretations, possibilities, suggestions to be careful, to think ahead, to prepare for what might come. At first, she listens the way we all do, with curiosity, with politeness, with an open mind. But the human mind has a fragile boundary between curiosity and concern. And once crossed, it's difficult to tell where one ends and the other begins. That night, nothing has changed around her. The house is the same. Her family is the same. But inside, something subtle has shifted. A quiet tension appears. Thoughts begin looping. What if he's right? What if there's something she's not seeing? What if peace is just an illusion she's been clinging to? As a storyteller, and as someone who has spent years listening to people unpack their inner worlds, I recognize this moment well. This is not the beginning of chaos. It's the beginning of doubt. And doubt doesn't arrive screaming. It arrives softly, disguised as concern, pretending to be wisdom. The most unsettling part is this: nothing bad has happened yet. And that's exactly why the anxiety feels so confusing. She isn't reacting to reality. She's reacting to imagined futures, to borrowed fears that don't belong to her. And without realizing it, she begins to look at her peaceful life through a lens that no longer feels clear. Not because life has changed, but because the story she's telling herself has. That's where this story truly begins. For her, those whispers begin in the most ordinary moments. The life she once moved through effortlessly now feels slightly heavier, as if she's carrying an invisible weight no one else can see. From a psychological perspective, this is how anxiety often grows. Not from danger, but from interpretation. Her old friend's words replay in her thoughts, not because they were dramatic, but because they were unresolved. The brain dislikes open-ended possibilities. When given vague suggestions about the future, it tries to fill in the blanks, and it almost always chooses the most unsettling version. She begins scanning her life for signs. Small misunderstandings feel larger than they are. Moments of silence feel loaded. She wonders if happiness is something that can suddenly be taken away, without warning, without cause. And the more she searches for reassurance, the further away it seems to drift. What's important here is that she doesn't act recklessly. She doesn't lash out or withdraw completely. Instead, she overthinks. And overthinking is often socially invisible, which makes it dangerously easy to dismiss. She is still a devoted partner. Inside, she is caught in a quiet negotiation between fear and reason. We assume anxiety is trying to protect us. In some ways, it is. But protection without clarity becomes control. She starts giving disproportionate authority to thoughts that have no evidence, treating speculation as if it were insight. The future, once a neutral space, becomes a source of emotional tension. This is where people often say, "I don't know why I feel this way." Nothing bad is happening, and that confusion adds another layer of distress. She begins questioning her own judgment. If peace feels fragile, maybe she's been naive. Maybe trust is something reserved for people who don't think deeply enough. Slowly, she notices a change in how she relates to her family. Not in behavior, but in presence. She is physically there, yet mentally elsewhere, trying to anticipate outcomes, trying to prevent pain that hasn't occurred. And ironically, this hypervigilance creates the very distance she fears. Not because she loves them less, but because fear narrows attention. She finds herself asking a different question, not "what if something goes wrong?" but "what if I'm the one making peace impossible?" That question doesn't bring immediate relief, but it opens a door. It suggests that maybe the problem isn't her life, but the lens through which she's been viewing it. And for the first time, since that conversation with her old friend, she considers the possibility that certainty is not found in predictions, but in how one chooses to relate to the present moment. There comes a quiet moment when tension fades, not because answers appear, but because awareness returns. Watching her family, she realizes her anxiety came from disconnection, not insight. By reclaiming her inner authority and trusting lived reality over imagined fear, she finds alignment and the anxiety gently loses its hold. She chooses to trust the process of her life rather than the predictions surrounding it. She chooses to invest energy in what is tangible communication, shared time, emotional presence, instead of feeding scenarios that cannot be tested or resolved. From the outside, nothing changes dramatically, but internally, everything does. This is the climax of the story, though it doesn't look like one, because the most profound turning points in human psychology are often invisible. They happen when a person stops running mental simulations of fear and starts living again. And in that return to the present, she rediscovers something simple but foundational. Peace was never missing. It was waiting for her to come back. When a story like this reaches its end, it rarely offers a dramatic conclusion. Instead, it leaves us with something quieter, something more useful, a mirror. Because at some point, most of us have stood exactly where she stood, listening to a voice that wasn't our own, letting imagined futures speak louder than lived reality. This story does not argue that others are wrong or that advice is harmful. It simply suggests that no one else can inhabit your reality for you. No prediction can replace presence. No imagined future deserves more care than the relationships and moments unfolding right now. In the end, the most sustainable foundation we have is not certainty about tomorrow, but trust in ourselves today. Trust in our ability to respond, to adapt, and to grow. And when that trust is restored, peace is no longer something we chase. It becomes something we live. If this story resonated with you, like the video, subscribe for deeper life stories, and share it with someone who needs clarity today.